Mohammad Reza Pahlavi becomes the Shah of Iran, an event that is not new for the country. The monarchical regime has lasted for 2,500 years. However, for the world it became quite a spectacle. Pahlavi became a key figure in 20th century global politics and the last Shah of the country. All thanks to the intelligence agency he built. SAVAK, the Shah's intelligence service, which helped him rise, then caused his fall.
They were inventive in torture methods. The interrogators always came up with various torture methods. I'll provide an example. Imagine entering a restaurant with a menu of dishes. There's usually one signature dish from the chef. SAVAK agents had a similar menu.
But first, a little background. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, upon coming to power, continued his father's policy of reforming Iran. In short, he tried to steer the country towards Western civilization. It wasn't difficult, but the Shiite clergy, advocating for Islamic fundamentalism, stood in the way. The main opponent of the Shah became the radical figure Ruhollah Mousavi Khomeini.
In a few years, Khomeini made a loud statement about himself. Under his leadership, the clergy crushed those advocating for Iran's modernization. The clergy eliminated several politicians and officials. Khomeini protected them, as killings in Iran required approval from top religious leaders. Khomeini embodied this top leadership himself.
It's not right to call him the antagonist in this story, as Pahlavi was far from saintly either. His reforms included a free land market, gender equality and open oil access for foreign companies. The British and Americans were the first to access the black gold. On one hand, they were draining Iran of all its resources. On the other hand, Tehran's economy was growing. Mohammad Mossadegh, a prime minister candidate, decided to build his career on oil. He advocated for nationalizing the country's oil, rallying thousands of Iranians to protest the Shah's policies. Nationalizing oil meant severing ties with the Americans and British. As a result, economic collapse. Shah Pahlavi bet on oil, investing millions in energy companies, and could not afford such a move. Therefore he went to the US for help. In Washington they assured him that Mossadegh would be silenced. Mossadegh was arrested with CIA help in 1953. To ensure the Shah's security, they helped him create a powerful military. All they wanted in return was access to the oil.
The Americans supplied Iran with heavy weapons, trained the military, and sent their own consultants. In Iran, some officials just talked about needs, dislikes, and future plans.
Along with modernizing the army, which became the strongest in the region, the Americans began creating Iran's intelligence agency. Thus began the creation of SAVAK, Iran's Ministry of National Security. Officially, no one acknowledged this. The agency was a key tool for the Shah, so recruits were carefully chosen. They sent recruits to America for training, invested millions, aiming to create an agency that would control the entire country. Those hired were not told about the conditions or details. They weren't told who they'd be working for.
We thought it was a job in the Prime Minister's office, or in a building associated with his office.
Once we saw the work, we realized the organization had nothing to do with the Prime Minister's office. In fact, it was a secret agency called SAVAK. It was created to protect the Shah's regime. But it was too late to back out.
American agents and Western researchers often claimed that SAVAK was the most effective intelligence agency in the Persian region at the time. Officially, SAVAK didn't exist yet. The bill only appeared in 1957. By 1954, communist cells in the Iranian army were identified and eliminated. The agents showed impressive results. They were trained by the CIA, Mossad, and even MI6. If not trained by these agencies, the KGB would have handled Iran. In 1957, the government received a request from the Shah to officially approve a new agency. This is how SAVAK appeared. Under Pahlavi's plan, the agency was to spy on anti-government activists, dissidents, students, opposition, and anyone threatening the regime. For some reason, no one was suspicious. Trained by US, British, and Israeli agents, SAVAK quickly became a ruthless terror tool, killing anyone opposed to Pahlavi. The Shah spent huge amounts on the intelligence agency. The agents were his first line of defense in reforming Iran.
SAVAK had money for everything. Agents never had to ask or wait. They accessed the national budget for cars, buildings, and weapons. They had it all.
Timur Bakhtir was appointed as the first director. He loyally carried out the Shah's orders and fully supported his policies. Reforms were carried out, Iran was getting back on its feet. But at what cost? Anyone who questioned Pahlavi's policies ended up in a coffin instantly. Bakhtir personally oversaw this. Under his leadership, SAVAK suppressed dissent and opposition consistently. If agents found the meeting place of opposition groups or threats to the regime, the building was destroyed immediately, along with everyone inside.
SAVAK was a very powerful organization. It was developed by foreign intelligence to protect the Shah. Agents controlled everything related to Iran's internal security. People were even afraid to mention the name of this agency.
Under Bakhtir, SAVAK consisted of 9 departments, each with clearly defined roles. Close coordination helped the agency remain secret to this day. It is still unknown how many people worked for the agency, what its budget was, and what operations agents conducted outside Iran.
The first directorate handled recruitment. The second handled military training. The third was responsible for local authority. The fourth was responsible for internal security. The fifth focused on foreigners. The sixth oversaw finances. The seventh oversaw the Middle East. The eighth handled counterintelligence. The ninth coordinated all other directorates.
The third directorate, overseeing local authority, received most attention. Agents dictated policy on paper to local governments. In reality, they monitored to prevent deviation from the Shah's policy. This department was funded by the CIA, Mossad and Pahlavi. The third directorate guaranteed the Shah and his family's safety. Parvez Sabeti was appointed as the chief.
Sabeti's close ties with ministers made him a prominent figure in Iran. Everyone in the country recognized his face.
Parvez Sabeti frequently appeared on TV, covering up the SAVAK's bloody activities. After raids, tortures, detentions of opposition, or the dispersal of protests, he made statements defending the royal family. He also ensured that everything happening within the walls of the SAVAK buildings remained secret. So it is still unknown how many people were tortured by agents. According to various organizations, including Amnesty International, the regime's victims ranged from 100,000 to 380,000 people.
The Shah's reforms may have had a chance of success, but his ministers kept the country's troubles from him. This was the result of his dictatorship. Repression, crime, and poverty in certain social groups led to the destruction of Iran's intellectual elite.
This was the work of the CIA and Mossad. Prisoners were tortured using Nazi methods with an Iranian twist. As a result, SAVAK had over 50 torture methods to extract information from prisoners. After interrogations, only a few managed to survive.
During my entire leadership, I never encountered torture, repression, or any other violence within the walls of SAVAK's headquarters or prisons. Everything that so-called former prisoners claim is a lie. There was no official confirmation, and there never will be.
This is not the whole lie. Parvez Sabeti even wrote a book in which he whitewashed himself and the regime's actions. Prisoners who survived the torment tell a completely different story. They recall with horror the main SAVAK prison. The Nazis built it in the 30s. The cells were specifically designed to be unbearably cold in winter and hot in summer. In its entire history, not a single escape was recorded.
They tied our hands like this, and then tied a bucket of sand behind us. It pulled so hard downwards that it felt like it would tear your arms off. They used this tactic on several of my comrades.
When thirsty, they'd force several liters of water down the prisoner's throat. It was a stroke of luck if it wasn't boiling water. They sometimes tied heavy weights to the testicles and forced prisoners to stand. They electrocuted, tortured with cold water, or pulled out teeth and nails with tools far from surgical. Anyone supporting communism, protests, or opposing the Shah faced such atrocities.
We tied their hands, made them sit, and put something heavy on their shoulders. The pressure on their neck, shoulders, and spine made them speak. The head was always down, and it was impossible to straighten up.
They didn't hesitate to torture women either. They were whipped, had nails pulled out, or forced to run endlessly. The most well-known female detainee was Ashraf Dihiani. She was imprisoned for being a member of a communist organization. And the communists in Iran were hated. Probably more than the opposition. In 2 years in prison, she endured almost every torture method used by SAVAK. She managed to escape Iran in 1973, after which she wrote a book about her imprisonment.
You may continue your murderous plunder and crimes, but remember, you will not escape your ultimate fate. We will exhaust you and then we will win. Although it will be in a long battle. When one of us falls, dozens of others come in his place.
Reforming the country failed. In his attempt to improve things, Shah Pahlavi created a service that silenced criticism, resulting in the intimidation and abuse of ordinary people. Iran was cloaked in fear. And when it reached its peak, a new player entered the game, one who would steer the country in an entirely opposite direction. Ruhollah Mousavi Khomeini, the spiritual leader whose arrival would change Iran and spark a revolution. But more on this in the next episode.